Hi, I'm Sydney, and today I'm going to be talking about the HBO series 6 Feet Under. This show doesn't normally fit into the category of content being horror-based that I'm usually focusing on, but I just finished watching it last week for the very first time, and it has just stuck with me to my core. I became so invested in these characters that I can't seem to let it go, so I'm going to discuss it today. 6 Feet Under, on the surface, is a show about a funeral home and the family that lives and works there, but at its depth, there are so many pretty obvious themes about life, death, grief, the things that happen in between that, the messiness of being human, and it really feels like the show is leading up to this overarching message about the preciousness of life. And if it hasn't become obvious at this point, I will be discussing spoilers of the show, so I really recommend watching it. It's so good. And I think one of the reasons that this show is so good is because of how the characters are written. Each and every single character in this show is very dynamic, well thought out, and no one is the good guy and the bad guy, or even really the protagonist, ? Whereas I think Nate is kind of introduced to be the main sort of journey that we're following a little bit. He's kind of a jacked up character. He has a lot of things wrong with him as well. So every character is just so well developed that they feel, although flawed, very real. Like we love them so much and can also be mad at them for being horrible at certain times too. I feel like family relationships, people that you're the closest to are often sometimes the people that you can be the most frustrated with, and that's sort of almost like a dynamic that they build as the viewer in relating to these characters. So let's talk about these characters. So as I already kind of mentioned, let's talk about Nate Fisher, who is portrayed by Peter, I actually don't know how to say his last name, Krause. Where to start with Nate? My opinion or vision of him really changed throughout the show, as far as me thinking at first he was quite the protagonist, and then his character just became so layered that he is complicated as far as how I feel about him. But he's the eldest son of the Fisher family, and he comes home after the death of the family's father, and he ends up staying to work at the funeral home. I'm just gonna say it. He's a deeply selfish character. He is constantly making choices that bewilder me and baffle me. In his relationships, he has a hard time committing to things, people, and when he does make those commitments, he often harbors resentment that makes him not a great partner to be with, I think. And while I often felt frustrated by his choices, particularly when it came to getting together with Lisa and then getting back together with Brenda, and I think that within that arc is when I truly was like, dude, what are you doing? Yeah, I think it was those last seasons where I felt the most disappointed in him. Within that, I felt like I also understood him. His character was developed enough that while he was making very messy choices, I felt like we got enough of a window into who he is that I understood why he was making those choices. So very well written, even though he might be one of maybe the character I get the most frustrated with, because he's so close to happiness so many times and he just can't seem to settle and enjoy. Oh, it's so devastating. Next, let's discuss David Fisher, who is portrayed by Michael C. Hall. We all know him as Dexter, but this is a very different side of Michael C. Hall as an actor, and he is so spectacular in this show. David's arc, I think, is rooted in self-acceptance throughout the show, and is also about, I think, overcoming his fears wrapped around self-hatred, which again kind of ties through into self-acceptance. And from what I've heard in my consumption of things that I become engrossed in, I am always looking up interviews and stuff after, and it really does seem like for the time this was released in 2000, when the show started, that his portrayal of a gay man on TV was pretty profound, in that he wasn't stereotyped. He was so well developed. His journey felt authentic, And I mean, I can't speak to that because that's not my journey, but I will say watching the show, he does feel very real. And I think in a sad way though, David's journey is also wrapped in a lot of trauma. In season 1, he is so tightly wound, as Ferris Bueller would say.
Pardon my French, but
David
is so tight that if you stuck a lump of coal up his ass, in 2 weeks you'd have a diamond.
He's so buttoned up in his little cute suits. He's like in control at the funeral home. Nate shows up, starts to, bring a little chaos, or bring a little bit of shake up the orderliness within there. David comes to a turning point in his life where he's forced to confront his identity of being a gay man. And it's a really, really sweet and just fills me with so much joy to see his relationship with Keith, how that develops. Obviously, they have a breakup at one point and then they come together. And it's just so ultimately driven by love. And I think he's probably a character I relate to more. David is concerned with morality. He is concerned with justice. He's concerned with right and wrong, and to a point where it sort of backfires on himself. But the vulnerability that Michael C. Hall as David consistently shows throughout the series is so beautiful and heartbreaking too, particularly when we get to the hostage episode, which I will get into. It wrecked me. I've been talking about David for a while now, but basically I love that as much as he struggles with his self-doubt, self-hatred, insecurity, he's constantly pushing back against this. And though he has his weaknesses, he is always striving for a hope and love, Great guy. Claire Fisher. Oh, Claire. She's portrayed by Lauren Ambrose, and I think that in season 1, she's portrayed as kind of a little bit freaks and geek style. She's like the freak at school. She's a little bit isolated. She's the girl who drives the hearse. We all know she would have been the coolest kid at school if she was at your high school. Like, she's absolutely gorgeous. She's artsy. That hearse is so dope. So, like, let's not even pretend she's the weird kid at school, first of all. But I think I relate to Claire a lot too. I've also heard that she was supposed to be the sort of character that took on the persona of the creator Alan Ball. Like, she is sort of a representation of him and his life experience. Claire is someone like truly in that pinnacle of life of just trying to figure out who they are, what they care about post high school. What am I supposed to be doing with my life? Developing her artistry, figuring out if that's her identity. What happens if it's not? What happens if things don't go the way you think they are? Does that destroy who you are as a person? Like, her journey is so about, I feel like, figuring out, again, self-identity, similar to David, but very different in a more sort of the roads diverge sort of way. It feels like we're constantly watching her grow up and have life experiences where, like, we're just watching her make a lot of mistakes, I feel like, when it comes to her relationship with gay, a lot of like relationship things, because that is kind of a theme throughout the show as well, as like people's relationships with one another. But from her with Gabe to her with Billy, oh my God, and seeing her come out of these phases in life and feeling the growth of this person. I particularly identified as well to her college journey and post-college journey of her quitting school, not getting the grant she thought she was going to, getting a typical job, 9 to 5, crashing and burning there, and then figuring out what, is going to make her happy. I think these narratives are very common. A lot of people experience this, but I think for Claire, it's told in a way that feels so genuine, and her choices that she makes within this are pure and like kind of crazy and impulsive for the age that she is. And she's delightful. Like, I'd want to be friends with her. Ruth Fisher. Oh, Ruth. She is portrayed by Frances Conroy. I was familiar with her previously from American Horror Story, knowing that she was a fantastic actress. And oh my God, is she so incredible in this that if I had never seen her in anything else, I would think this is just how that actress is. She is the matriarch of the Fisher family, but she's a character who really struggles on knowing how to mother exactly her relationship with her kids. She doesn't ever seem to know them very well. Their relationship is, I feel like she almost, and her and David relate to each other the most in this way. She's almost trying to, at the beginning of the show, fit into this idea of who a mother is. You know, the kid comes into the room, oh, I'll make you a bowl of cereal. Like, doesn't even ask them if they want it. Like, I don't know, she's providing for them, but she's also not really like asking the hard questions and truly listening to them when they, especially her and Claire's relationship is so messy. But I think she harbors a lot of resentments from choices that she had when she was young. So when she watches her kids making choices that feel so liberating, she gets angry a lot, even though I think she's actually happy for them. She is yearning so much for connection. She's just such a lonely person. She's so awkward and she's confusing. And she is so infuriating sometimes, but she's also a character. I love all these characters. She's also someone that I respect and I really have like sympathy for. Brenda Chenoweth. So she is portrayed by Rachel Griffiths, and I was familiar with this actress previously from Muriel's Wedding, which is an amazing film. If you have never seen it, Toni Collette, Rachel Griffiths, incredible movie.
Stick your drink up your ass, Tanya. I would rather swallow razor blades than drink with you.
Brenda is one of the most psychologically rich, depthy characters of the show. A lot of layers to unpack with this person. She's deeply intellectual, deeply self-destructive, very strong, very bold. It's really refreshing to see a woman written this way. And she's bold and strong, but without being she's like, she has her moments, but I think in general as a character, she's not two-dimensional. As you probably know, she's Nate's love interest, pretty much through-lined throughout the show, minus the Lisa debacle. Again, now that I'm actually vocalizing it, her journey has a lot to do with self-acceptance and self-love as well. She is someone who just really sabotages herself consistently from, she's in a relationship with Nate, and then she starts her adulterous escapades, which I think she at first thinks is an addiction, but if I remember correct, it's more of her understanding her self-destructiveness from her relationship with Billy. There's so much trauma there, and her childhood with that book, The Dark and Light. I'm blanking on the name right now. I think she struggles in her relationship with Nate because she doesn't fully love herself, is kind of the gist that comes through. And then finally, I feel like when she does, Nate kind of blows it. But overall, she's a character that I don't relate to in a lot of ways, but I respect her so much. I respect her journey so much. And even though she's kind of crazy, like I think if in real life she'd be a character or person that would intimidate me, her presence, she's so blunt and analytical, and it's hard because on the surface she's like, I don't care what you think, but then deep in her core, you know that she really does care, and she seeks validation and to be loved and vulnerability and all of that. But just meeting her on the surface, I'd be like, damn, this girl is cool and scary. But by the end of the show, what a journey like that she's left with. We'll get there. Keith Charles. He is portrayed by Matthew St. Patrick. Keith is a grounding presence throughout the show. He is so incredibly patient with his love interest, David, especially at the beginning while David's closeted. And I love that Keith has his limitations as far as in season 1, especially where David is going back and forth, struggling as far as coming out and being comfortable with his sexuality. And Keith basically has to set a boundary with him of like, I respect how you feel, but I'm not going backwards in my life, kind of thing. It's really commendable. He's a character who is so strong, but is also navigating his own life. He's not the anchor for David all the time. I like that he has his own struggles as far as being a cop, or like struggles within masculinity within his profession as a security officer, or security guard as well. I think the representation of being a Black gay man especially has its own hurdles. I think the storyline about him and his family, they don't actually end up following. I mean, it comes up a few times, but it's not devastatingly recurring. But his relationship with his father and his own origins of trauma and how he harbors that aggression that can come out here and there, and it ends up affecting his police work, but then it also comes out later at home with David and with Keith and his own family. And by the end of the series, though, you see the way that he takes on the role of a father is so amazing. Like, there's just so much progression and maturity and self-awareness that Keith develops throughout the show, that he is just overall such like a good person. Like, he's different than the other characters where I feel like he is self-aware. I mean, with his aggression, he has some denial stuff about his masculinity, stuff like that. But I feel like in himself, he knows who he is. I think his struggle more has to do with a little bit of what his societal roles are, figuring out what his compartmentalizing is in different roles within his life. I feel like by the end, though, he is kind of comes together. You know what I mean? Like, at his security job, he tells his coworker, he's like, yeah, I'm gay. And I think he sort of repairs, not like tremendously, but I think he finds an even keeling with his dad, if I remember correct. And he just really steps up. Like, great guy. Love him. Don't get me started on that finale episode, though. I'm like, what the? Okay. Federico Rico Diaz. Played by Freddie Rodriguez. We have Rico. Rico starts the show as someone who's trying to be the right, good man. He's a family man. He's so in love with his wife. He works so hard at his job. He's really talented at his job. He's striving for better, but facing the limitations of the circumstances that he's in, but he's making the best of it. He's overall deeply optimistic and a hard worker. As the show goes on, that gets screwed up because he's a dum-dum. Rico's infidelity in this show is something that really disappointed me. And I think not in the writing, like I think in the show, like it's a fair choice. People make these decisions, but I just felt like almost like I knew him. I was just like, dude, what are you doing? I was just so disappointed in him. He had it so good. And I know his wife had been struggling with depression and stuff, but like, yeah, he really screwed it up, and it ends up coming together in the end. And I think overall he's someone who really wants to do the right thing, and he tries really hard. He's also deeply imperfect. He's very homophobic, specifically at the beginning of the series. He's prejudiced in certain ways. And I think he's someone who seems to be the accumulation of his life experience. I mean, we all are, but like whether it be culturally or certain narratives that he's been told, I think have influenced a lot of his perception of other people. But I never feel like he's actively, I don't know. He's pretty homophobic, actually. I think, though, you can tell he's someone who really cares about anything that he's involved in, whether it be his work, his family, even his mistress. Like, he gets so invested in things, and he's kind of just a little puppy dog a lot of the times too. He's just a guy trying his best, and he's funny. I love him. And again, as I've heard from Freddie Rodriguez in interviews post watching the series, this is also pretty tremendous as far as Hispanic Latinx representation in media, where he wasn't portraying a stereotype. Like, he wasn't rejecting his culture. Like, his culture is a huge part of his identity within the show, but he's not in the role of a stereotyped Hispanic person, like as in being like in a gang or something like that. He's just an everyday sort of family man kind of thing. So love that. Billy Chenoweth. Billy is portrayed by Jeremy Sisto. What does that say about me that Billy is such a gripping character? Like, I always want more Billy, even though I'm like, he's the worst. But I'm like, come on, Billy, where are you at? Billy is terrifying, tragic, brilliant. Sometimes his mental illness is portrayed in a way that feels very authentic, especially when he's with Claire and he's like really trying to hold it together, and then he ends up failing at that. Sometimes though, maybe I'd have to give it a second watch. Sometimes it feels really heightened, like, oh, mental illness equals violence, which I think they kind of end up, that happens more towards the beginning of the series, and then as it goes on, I'm glad they still develop his character, because I feel like in maybe other shows they would have had maybe a, this B character come on, be crazy, do something crazy. Like the OC. I almost think about the OC. Oh my gosh, I didn't even connect this before, but like Marissa has this guy that she's seeing for a while, and then he has like a crazy mental episode in a hotel or something, and then he's just gone. But this is a character that's obviously different that like keeps developing and stuff like that. That's a tangent, but let's move on. His relationship with Brenda, it's pretty disturbing. It's pretty disturbing and sad. And they are so bonded by trauma, but also love. It's so complicated. It's so complicated that I can't even get into it right now because it would take an hour just to discuss their relationship. That could be a whole video on its own. But you never quite know where Billy stands. Very impulsive. There is an uncertainty about him that makes his presence very haunting and a little bit scary, but also charming. And you're like, what's he gonna do? Jeremy Sisto is awesome. Love him. Lisa Kimmel Fisher, portrayed by Lily Taylor, which I was obsessed with the movie The Haunting as a kid. Don't know why. There was like a summer I literally sat and probably watched it 4 times in a row on VHS because I had no life and nothing better to do. She is a fantastic actress, and it's a shame that her character in this makes me mad. But she's someone that I didn't really come to respect until she was gone, truly. And towards the end of their relationship. Lisa is Nate's baby mama. You know, she was just... Even from that first visit where Claire and Nate go to visit Lisa in Seattle, I was like, this girl is so way too desperate. She's got to like move on. This poor girl, she's just in love with him. When she gets pregnant, I think, and that even is a question that comes up later, is like, is that baby even Nate's? From what we come to find out later. And I don't even think it matters. I think she probably saw it as an opportunity to, you know, did she run into Nate? I'm even blanking about how they reconnected. Did they run into each other at a grocery store? I don't know. But I think she saw that opportunity and took it, kind of.
Oh, by the way, I'm pregnant.
Okay.
You were crying because you knew you were home. Because you missed me. Because you knew that you and I should be together.
And I think she was so, like, desperate to have that relationship with him. She just loved him for so long, and I think she could have been a really great wife to him, but it was so manufactured in this sort of forced situation that it was kind of doomed from the beginning. The second they got together, it was like, this is not going to end well, and where's Brenda? I want Brenda back. Because even though Nate and Brenda's relationship was chaotic, there was passion that stemmed within it, which isn't always great either, but you know, there was an authentic connection. And Lisa's connection with Nate, while authentic, it wasn't stemmed in true love. I don't think it was ever. I think he loved Lisa, but I don't know that he was ever in love with her, which comes up, you know, within their relationship as time goes on and they're trying to work through things with Maya. But her ending, because honestly, I was kind of like, okay, I'm ready for them to figure out a way to get Lisa out of here. And then they did. And I was like, damn, they really went for it, you know? And I think in a way that they reveal who the killer is, added a whole other dynamic layer to Lisa, where it made her a little bit more fleshed out of like, oh, there's this whole other side to her that we don't really know. And that actually made me a little bit more interested in her. And I mean, I don't think she was the villain or anything like that. Like when I expressed that her character kind of annoyed me or whatever, I don't think she did anything wrong. You know what I mean? Like I don't think she purposefully trapped Nate or anything like that. I think she was just a woman who was doing her best and let her sort of infatuation with Nate get in the way of her being happy, kind of. Oh, but her spoiler, I already warned you, her death and that scene of Nate giving her proper, like doing her justice and burying her properly the way she wanted was so touching. And Lisa, George Sibley, James Cromwell. George gives the character shift of a lifetime. Okay, that's dramatic, but George is such a stable beacon of optimism in Ruth's journey when they meet and get married, and he's so intellectual and a different tone within the Fisher household when he enters the picture. And I knew there was a little bit of a red flag waiting for something to drop, maybe a shoe. Not a bomb though, and it kind of turned into a bomb. because we were getting these packages of poop on the doorstep. We go, there's something going on here. There's a reason this is happening.
I know that you sent us the feces box and the feces gift basket.
We kind of find out why. Oh, he has a estranged or sort of like broken relationship with his kids. Okay. And then, again, mental illness. Boom. Backstory of him being with his mother, passing away. Like, that was very traumatic. Watching Ruth have to deal with George's unraveling and Ruth herself unraveling within that process is very hard. I think George, I look at very sympathetically, especially the way Ruth treats him is so harsh. It's kind of insane. They portray it in a way where I do see where Ruth is coming from. She's like, my husband died. I'm with these other men who are like not giving me what I need.
Yeah, this.
Finally think I found what I need, and it's a boatload of something else. But at the end of the day, George, I do think, is a really good person outside of his mental illness. It's really sad to see the way that his illness affects his social life and the way that he ends up coming through for Ruth. I think when Nate passes and with helping with Maya is so amazing. Again, they take this journey and this sort of trope that could have been utilized of mental illness and like, see this guy, he seems perfect and he's not, he's crazy. You know what I mean? They could have just left it at that and then he goes off. But no, they bring him back. They show like how much he has to offer as a person and how empathetic and how he is really like a beam of support for Ruth at certain times. And again, fleshed out character. At first he wasn't my favorite. He was kind of annoying. He's talking about rocks a lot. What's up with this guy? By the end, I'm like, he's someone who's there for them. And that's a lot. That means a lot, I think, for someone like Ruth. Let's not forget about Nathaniel Fisher Sr. He is portrayed by Richard Jenkins. I love Richard Jenkins so much. I think about him in Step Brothers. He's in The Shape of Water. He's in so many movies, and it's kind of a shame. No, it's not a shame, but I wish his character was a little bit more of a consistent presence throughout this show. I think the way they have him worked in is appropriate. It's a little more strong at the beginning because he had just passed, and then it sort of fizzles in and out. But we don't actually ever truly get to know Nathaniel Fisher, I believe. I think we see glimpses of him when Ruth is looking at an old photo album and she discusses when he had to go off to Vietnam and they got a hotel together and just their love. And other than that, most of our portrayals that we see of him are in representations of psychological projections from the children. For example, when we're seeing him with David, Nathaniel Sr. is expletive. He sucks. He's super homophobic. He's very judgmental. And this actually is a projection of David onto himself about, again, like I discussed earlier, his self-hatred. And when we are looking at Nate too, we're seeing that he's constantly wanting to please his dad, and he's fighting with him a lot and dealing with judgment, but then also dealing with encouragement too. But it's just a way for them to work out their own thoughts of themselves onto this character. Sometimes Nathaniel's ghost is very wise and compassionate. Other times he's very mocking and smug. But I think that he's also just a symbol of unresolved grief and how people we love are gone, but they never really leave us in whatever fashion that means, whether you interpret that as like a literal ghost or just like we feel their presence in what they might be saying to us, but really it's just our own thoughts projecting into ourselves. That makes sense. So let's get into some standout episodes. For me, I'm just going to dive into 3. There's so many episodes in this that have really amazing highlight moments, but there's 3 that really rocked me to my core, and they're probably the ones that you're thinking of too. But let's get into it. The first one for me is going to be season 4, episode 5. That's my dog. This is David's hostage episode. You saw it coming. This episode left me shooketh, shaken, wrecked. It's a deeply intense, jarring episode of television. The psychological breakdown that David experiences is so vulnerable. He is just stripped down to nothing. I actually don't know if he won an Emmy for this performance or not. He deserves all the accolades for this performance. It's so interestingly written too, because it's not just this straightforward narrative of him getting taken hostage and trauma. It's amazing how they fit in these moments within this episode of him still dealing with his own sexuality, and I think some of his own, the complexities of the mind that think like, oh, well, maybe I can fix this guy, or like maybe I'm kind of attracted to him. But also, does that have to do with because he's being horrible to you, that part of your mind that hates yourself is also kind of like interested in this guy too? Like the way that his mind turns on himself. Oh God, it's just so intense. I was like, are they gonna kill David? That moment, that final moment when he's out in that alley and he puts the gun in his mouth. I was like, oh my God. Even just thinking about it, it felt like anything could happen. I did not know where it was going to go. And I love the way that the trauma from that episode plays out into that season, the whole next season. Like, this is something that's going to stay with David for the rest of his life. And it's hopefully something that he can work through to not let it interfere with his life. But it's something that he's going to have to carry with him. And so how he deals with that, wild. But it's nice that it's a through line. Like, it's a real person. This is something that happened to him, and here's how he moves on with it, Let's talk about the episode that made me cry the most. Do you think it's the finale? It's not. It's Nate's funeral. Spoiler. It's kind of crazy even thinking about this episode now. I could get emotional. It was something about it just hit me on a very personal level, having dealt with grief and losing family members myself. I think it's portrayed in a way that feels so raw and real. There's sort of a shock that happens. I did not think that they were going to kill Nate off either necessarily. Especially they give us that little teaser where he's like awake and doing fine, and then they just ex-Nate him the episode before. I was like, what the freak? Seeing the way each character processes his death differently is so emotional. His death is so suffocating in that episode. It's just so gut-wrenching. It's like this weird feeling, grief sometimes, where it's like a deep hollowness in your body, but like the heaviest feeling at the same time. And I feel like that was portrayed in the tone of this episode. Like, there's something so glaringly missing, which is Nate's presence, but then just like the weight and heaviness that you feel within the episode too, if that makes sense. Honestly, I feel like I could revisit this one again. I almost feel like I've like blocked certain things out of it because it was a little triggering, honestly. But I think it's like maybe that's what it was. Like when David's giving, I think, a speech or a eulogy and he starts crying. Been there. I've been there. Yeah, I think it was really well written. And I just love that they gave us that whole episode to process Nate's loss, which makes sense because they're a funeral home. Like, they're gonna have an episode regarding the funeral, but I don't know, I feel like they could have handled it differently if they wanted to. Like, I don't know, like when Nate and Lisa got together, there was a bit of a time jump. That was in a season change though, I think, too. But like, I just appreciate the way they did that. Now you know where I'm going with this. Third episode is the finale. I did not expect it to go the way it went, but in hindsight, it makes complete sense that they would show the death of each character. I think was like, oh my God, because I didn't think we would get that. I thought it would just be Claire driving off into the future. The future is boundless. Opportunity and hope lays ahead. But here's how it ends. Like, I don't know. I was just like, it was kind of beautiful and devastating at the same time. And then they have that Breathe Me by Sia playing, which I'll never hear that song the same again. Showing each of the characters' deaths was strangely traumatic and peaceful at the same time. Man, they did Keith dirty though. For real? Like, you're gonna have him get shot? Like, I don't know how I feel about that choice, to be honest. And I get it, things happen, and he was in a profession where it's higher risk, but I was like, come on, I don't want that. And you know what else was kind of a crazy choice? That, like, it was so funny because I've been watching this show on my own, and then my husband every once in a while will sometimes be in the room and like he'll catch a glimpse of it, and I'll be like, oh, what's going on? He'll watch for a second and then go do something else. He happened to come in during the Brenda and Billy dream sequence that we didn't know was a dream sequence. And he was like, huh. And then I was like, yeah, they're brother and sister. And he was like, what? And I was like, that was absolutely... I was like, are they really doing this in the finale? What is going on? And I know that's been kind of a through line of repressed trauma that they sort of both have, that Billy really kind of like leans into. But I was like, really? They're going to take it here? And then thank God it was a dream sequence, because I was like, let's please not dive into that right now. I can't take it. And then to see at the end that Brenda died while talking to Billy. And I've seen in other interviews as well that Rachel Griffith, the actress, was like, yeah, Brenda she's the one character that chose to die. She was like, I cannot listen to Billy's BS for one more second. I'm out. Which I think is so hilarious. Seeing Ruth pass and having Nate present himself to her like, hey mom, kind of like standing over on the side, and she sees him, was so beautiful. One thing that I was a little unsure of, if I'm totally honest, was Claire ending up with Ted. She moves off to New York. It implies she comes back, I think, for Ruth's funeral and reconnects with Ted, and then they get married. Ted is an interesting character because he is not the typical person that we would imagine Claire ending up with, being that he's conservative, he's a little bit more suit and tie kind of guy, but that's not who defines him. Like, he's so supportive, he's grounded, he's moral, like he knows what he's doing, he knows himself, he's funny, he's not a stiff person, but he's just a little bit more practical than I think Claire is used to, but also that conservative element I know is something that kind of gets in as a friction between them. But in those critical moments, similar to Brenda and Nate, which comes up as a conversation with Billy, was that in the finale? I don't think that was in the finale. That crazy moment, not crazy, but when like Billy's talking to Ted and Billy's like, I am so jealous of you, and like Ted's like, okay, I'm gonna go over there. It's so funny, so awkward, but it's true. I think maybe Claire and Ted are a little bit trauma bonded. I don't know if I love that they ended up together, to be honest. I'll accept it, because what were they gonna do? I mean, it's almost like the way they ended True Blood. True Blood, Anna Paquin's character just ended up marrying a random person. We weren't supposed to know. It's more of like she's moved on with her life. I would have taken that as an answer too if we saw some random person. I don't know if they felt forced that they had to show us someone we already knew, so we felt more connected to the moment, but it's fine. But I will say, when Claire was on her deathbed for her death scene, and then we saw that photo of Ted that was taken earlier, I was like, okay, that's kind of sweet. The way the finale left me feeling, though, the weirdest combination of closure and unclosure. Like, I felt complete. I felt like I know what happens to these characters. I understand their journey, but I also felt like I'm not done with them. I want more. Give me more. I've become so engrossed in this show and these characters that for it to just be done felt sad. And I think it was wise of Alan Ball to make the executive decision to end the show at a high note. I think, like Breaking Bad, like, I don't know, I think when shows know the direction they want to go to and end on their terms, I think tends to have probably a higher success rating because it's a little bit more in their control. So I don't know that they could have had a better ending. I think there's maybe like little tiny nuance changes in there I could see them making to tighten things up. But in general, it was so beautiful, and it encapsulated the show so perfectly about everyone's lives, and these people that you're so engrossed in are just gone, and that's life and that's death. And what do we take away from witnessing these people's lives, and how does it make us feel about turning off the show and going back about our own lives and the preciousness of it and all of those themes. I think this is a show where the message at the end is just about being more grateful for living and just more grateful about this journey that we get to experience, because it is kind of a heavy reminder, like, it's gonna end and you don't know when, so try to enjoy it, I guess. 6 Feet Under is a show that I think will stick with me for a long time. I know I for sure will revisit it. I think as I mentioned, I personally connected with it a lot just because of loss that I've faced in my own life. And I think from a young age, when I knew people who had passed away, grief and death and dying has been a theme that I've gravitated to as far as my mental space a lot, maybe in an unhealthy way at times, but just the brain, I feel like there's almost like this switch that can happen in your brain sometimes when almost you realize, oh, I'm gonna die, or oh, everyone I know is gonna die, or I'm gonna die, like before they die. So it's one of, like, I don't know, there's almost this like the switch that happened in my brain at some point in my life, and I kind of just had to sit with that, and it's something I still sit with. And I think we live in a culture and society where death is still quite taboo. And so this is a show that confronts it head on in a way that is humorous, dramatic, engaging, thrilling, devastating, all of the emotions. And they do it so beautifully. I don't even think this video is really doing the show justice. I almost feel like this is my venting session to release my thoughts on this show. 5 seasons in this length of time is hard to encapsulate, but I highly recommend it. If you've watched this and you haven't watched this show, silly you, watch it, because now you know too much. But what an amazing show. If you have seen it, please let me know what your favorite episodes were. What did you think of the finale? I think generally it was well received. Were there any themes or characters that stuck with you? I have heard in some sort of like reunion Zoom style interview that was done a few years ago during COVID, Freddie Rodriguez mentioned that if they were to do a reboot sequel, we see how all the characters die. So some of them are like, how could we do anything? We know what happens. But seeing Rico start his own funeral home and what leads up to his passing on the cruise ship would be very interesting. I think I am gluttonous for more of these characters, so I'm like, that would be so cool. I don't think it'll happen, but that would be so cool. I'm also listening right now to a podcast called, I'm using my phone to record right now, but I think it's called I just started it, Not Over 6 Feet Under, So Not Over 6 Feet Under, or something like that, but it's a recap episode by episode where these two women discuss the episode, their thoughts on the characters, and it kind of almost feels like, I'll listen to it while I'm driving, it feels like I'm rewatching the show with some friends, because I did watch the show by myself, so it's nice to like hear other people's thoughts on each episode. So I recommend that as well if you feel like you've seen the show and you want to revisit it in a different way. Yeah, other than that though, leave me comments on this show. I want to chit chat with people about it. It's so good. Is there another series that I should visit next? I've been wanting to watch The Sopranos, another HBO series, for a long time, and maybe that'll be my next one. Again, not horror related, but like, we like to mix it up. I'm sure I'm forgetting to say things about this show, but I think I just gotta end it here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.